Does Notre Dame actually have a quarterback competition? I think they do. It just might not be the one you expect. All that more coming right up.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, and welcome into Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. Today is Thursday, March 14th, and thank you for making this your first listen of the day. I'm Tyler Wojciak, and I'm the host. I'm a Notre Dame alum and producer covering college football for Fox Sports, and you can watch this show as well as every other episode on YouTube, or you can listen wherever you get your podcasts. If you are watching along on YouTube, please like the video below and subscribe to the channel, or if you're listening to the podcast, you can help us out by rating the show 5 stars. You could even leave a nice review and subscribe if you've not already. This episode is brought to you by Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or the Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Check them all out today at nissanusa.com. Today's show is all about competition, specifically competition to get on the field on the offensive side of the ball. So I'm going to go over the most intriguing position battles on offense that are going on during spring practice right now for Notre Dame. Then at the end, I have some thoughts on Notre Dame men's basketball after their season came to an end on Wednesday night, or really Wednesday during the day, following the loss to Wake Forest in the ACC Tournament. But we begin with the position battles, and I want to clarify a lot of these position battles are going to continue into the summer and likely into fall camp. But some of these might be wrapped up after spring, and either way, they're going to have a big impact on what we see when Notre Dame takes the field against Texas A&M in the season opener. Let's start with quarterback. I teased it in the open and the headline and all that. Does Notre Dame actually have a quarterback competition? They do. It's just not for the starting job. That is Riley Leonard's, okay? He would not have come over to Notre Dame to be the backup. He got really well compensated. I don't think it's a secret. Riley Leonard came to Notre Dame with a lot of NIL money, and he is going to be the starting quarterback for Notre Dame, barring injury. But that last part, barring injury, is important because Riley Leonard likes to run the ball a lot, and there's a good chance that he ends up missing a game or two, or maybe even more games than that this season as the starting quarterback, depending on how much Notre Dame wants to use him in the run game, which I believe they will a lot, at least in the big games like Texas A&M. He's probably going to be running a good amount. So with that in mind, the backup quarterback spot is actually really important. It's really important to every team, right? Because you can't just have someone who comes in and then holds the offense back and then the whole season is derailed. It's a good thing that hasn't happened to Notre Dame in recent memory, wink, wink. But I really think that the depth of that room is in a much better place than it's been in a really long time. I talked about this in yesterday's episode with Tim O'Malley from Irish Illustrated. We both agree that the depth from 1 through 4 is really, really impressive. So even though we all expect Riley Leonard to be the starting quarterback, we have a great battle on our hands between Steve Angeli, Kenny Minchey, and the true freshman CJ Carr, who's been on campus for just over 2 or 3 months now. So it's really interesting. And Steve Angeli is obviously the favorite here to win that backup job. He's been around the program the longest. He actually has real game experience, most recently in the Sun Bowl playing against Oregon State as the starter for that entire game. And he was really, really good in that game. Now, we also have to understand the context of the situation. Oregon State did not have anywhere near their full defense, but also in Angeli's defense, Notre Dame wasn't working with all of their best players at his disposal either. So it was a really good performance by him, and I think it showed that, hey, if for whatever reason Leonard can't play, Angeli is a guy that you can trust to take over and run the offense. So that's really good. But also, you've got a guy like Kenny Minchey who waited around his first year, barely played at all. My favorite moment of Kenny Minchey's freshman season is when he came in for the kneel down against Pittsburgh, which is just such a nice little petty thing. Even if Marcus Freeman didn't intend for it to be, I just love that he brought Minchey out, considering that he was committed to Pitt and then ultimately flipped like a month before signing day. As a guy who doesn't really like Pat Narduzzi, I love that. Anyway, let's get back to the competition here, because I think that Kenny Minchey has a bunch of talent, and it's time that it should be time, at least, that we start seeing that on the field. He's got a really, really accurate ball. I think he just has a great throwing motion as well, and I think he's sneaky athletic. So I think there is a chance that Kenny Minchey really pushes Steve Angeli for that backup job. And if he's able to do that, that's a really good place for Notre Dame, because think, Riley Leonard is a one-year rental. After the season, he's going to be gone. And if Kenny Minchie earns the backup job this year, then I think he's going to be in line to start next season. Hell, he might even be in line to start next season, even if he doesn't win the backup job, because if Angeli clearly is the number 2 guy and there's just not really an opportunity for him to jump Leonard, then he's probably going to enter his name in the transfer portal. I do not expect Notre Dame to have 3 scholarship quarterbacks going into fall camp. So if Minchie's able to beat out Angeli, he's definitely gone. And if he doesn't, well, maybe Angeli will decide to stay. And that puts Minchie in an interesting position because you've got CJ Carr there, the quarterback who was, a borderline 5-star. The fans are obsessed with him. And I think the future is extremely bright for CJ Carr. So if Kenny Minchie just can't beat out Steve Angeli, I think that's going to have long-lasting implications, because if Angeli decides to stay and Minchie's just stuck being the third-string quarterback, I think he could leave too. So there's a lot going on here, and it all depends on who wins that backup quarterback job. I think it's going to be Steve Angeli, but ultimately I do think he's going to transfer out, because after what we learned last year with Tyler Buchner, you really can't predict anything that happens with these quarterbacks. Like, I never would have guessed Tyler Buchner would end up at Alabama, but he did. And the reason he did is because he came in second behind Sam Hartman. So it's going to be a really interesting storyline to follow throughout spring practice, maybe the most interesting. All right, moving on to the next position that I'm going to be watching here. Right tackle. We got a battle between the fifth-year senior Tosh Baker and the redshirt sophomore Emil Wagner. And this is another thing that Tim and I talked about yesterday. I think this might be over before it even starts. And the reason why is Emil Wagner is listed as 281 pounds. And I know that you can still be a good lineman, even if you're a little bit undersized, but 281 pounds in modern college football, especially at a place like Notre Dame, it's just not going to cut it, not at right tackle. And I realized that Emil Wagner was a really highly sought-after recruit coming out of high school. I think he's probably loaded with talent, and I legitimately feel bad for the guy, because I think that trying to put on weight is really hard. Like, I had to do it a little bit when I was in high school. Now, granted, it's a little bit different because I was, first of all, playing high school football. I'm not comparing my situation to what Emil Wagner is going through entirely, because I was like, I don't know, I had to be like 145 pounds soaking wet, and I was just trying to get up to like 160, and I was drinking protein shakes, eating a lot of food, and it was just hard for me. Now, imagine being 281 pounds, and you already have to eat a lot of food just to maintain that weight, and then you try to add 20 more pounds on top of it. Now you're drinking like 3 protein shakes a day. You're eating thousands of calories. You have to wake up in the middle of the night and have a full meal and then try to go back to sleep. It does not feel great for your body, and you also have to maintain your athleticism, your agility, everything that makes you a great football player. So I legitimately feel sympathetic to Emil Wagner's situation if he just cannot hold that weight. But I think it's a little bit concerning that what we thought would be a really, potentially intense competition between the two, it just might not be that way, because Tosh Baker, even though we haven't really seen it come to fruition on the field, he has ideal size for a tackle. He's like 6'8", 320 plus pounds. So he's got that advantage. He also is the more experienced guy. And I think that if Notre Dame didn't think that he could potentially be a starter, they probably would have let him walk in the transfer portal. So I think that is very important to note here. And I just think that now that it's going to be more of a question of, is there a true winner in this competition, or is it a winner by default, like process of elimination? And if Emil Wagner just isn't going to get big enough to be the starting tackle, then it's going to be given to Tosh Baker. So I think the answer to that question is going to be determined by how Notre Dame pursues the tackle position in the transfer portal this cycle. That's probably going to give us an answer, because if they're really, really aggressive and they take just about anyone, that means that Tosh Baker probably didn't really win the competition. They were just like, hey, we need someone to go out there and play right tackle, and it's Tosh Baker. If Notre Dame does not pursue a tackle at all, then that's a really good sign. That means that not only did Tosh Baker win that job, that also means that they feel really good about Charles Jagasaw over there at left tackle. And I don't have that listed in my most intriguing position battles, because I don't think Jagasaw really has any competition right now. Maybe Sullivan Absher comes out of nowhere and really puts up a fight there, but I think he's got that locked down, and really the competition is at right tackle. So Notre Dame really needs a good offensive line. I've said over and over already, probably too much. Maybe you guys are tired of it already, but I'm pretty concerned about the offensive line, because I think Notre Dame has so many great pieces on this team. But if your offensive line really struggles, and you think back to what Notre Dame did in 2021, there were some games when they just couldn't stop anyone anyone from getting in the backfield. It can shut down an entire offense, and this right tackle position is very key. It's not as important as the left tackle, but it's still very important, and Notre Dame really needs one of these guys, Tosh Baker or Emil Wagner, to step up and not just win the job, but take complete control of it. And it might not happen this spring, but hopefully it does by the time that Notre Dame heads to College Station in September. All right, coming up next, we'll continue with my top position battles on offense with a look at guard and another spot you might not expect, but actually could be very important. This week's March Madness bracket highlight is brought to you by our friends at Nissan. Each week, we're picking one team that stands out, a team that's pushed it further than the rest. Just like any of the all-new 2024 Nissan SUVs, these guys were able to make it to the next level. The Houston Cougars can only be described as an armada. This top-seeded team is as hardcore as it gets out there, so it's no wonder they're expected to land a top seed in the tournament after their first season in the Big 12. I mean, did you see what they did to Kansas last weekend? That was about as dominant as it gets. I couldn't believe it. Now, I'm thinking a little bit differently about where I got Houston going in my bracket once we get Selection Sunday next week. Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or the Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. Before we get back to the position battles, be sure to mark your calendar for the Locked On College Basketball Bracket Breakdown Show on Monday, March 18th at 7 a.m. Eastern. Experts Andy Patton and Isaac Shade will break down their brackets and discuss everything that you need to know to fill out a winning bracket and prepare for this year's NCAA tournament. Find the Locked On Bracket Breakdown on Monday, March 18th on the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. Okay, the next position battle I'm looking at is on the offensive line, and this time we're going to look at the two guard spots. Right now, it's a three-man battle between Pat Coogan, who started every game last season, and then you've got Billy Schrauth and Rocco Spindler. Now, last year, Rocco Spindler surprised us all, and actually so did Pat Coogan to that extent, because neither of those guys were running with the ones during last year's spring practice, and then in fall camp, they took control of the guard positions, and they jumped Billy Schrauth and Andrew Kristovich, and then they started there for most of the season until Rocco Spindler suffered a knee injury that sidelined him for the rest of the 2023 season. Then Billy Schrauth came in for him. Pat Coogan, though, held it down all year long, and now this year, it's a really interesting battle, because Pat Coogan is the more experienced guy. Like I said, he started every game, but Rocco Spindler won the job until he got hurt, and then Billy Schrauth came in and was very serviceable. I know that the Notre Dame coaching staff is extremely high in Billy Schrauth. I am as well. We all know how highly sought after he was coming out of Wisconsin, and how aggressive Marcus Freeman and Tommy Rees were in pursuing him. As soon as Marcus Freeman got the head coaching job, I believe that was the first stop. They went to Billy Schrauth's house. They got his commitment away from the hometown Badgers, and the sky is the limit for him. I think I've even heard some Quentin Nelson comparisons thrown around, which for me, I'm like, okay, pump the brakes. So last year, we all expected Billy Schrauth to start as a redshirt freshman. He's getting the first team reps. Then he gets jumped by Spindler. And then I think a lot of people were surprised. But if you remember, there was a time when like Spindler was the Billy Schrauth, where he was the highly sought after guy. We're like, why isn't he really playing? Well, credit to him for sort of beating the doubters and earning that starting job. And it's actually starting again, because right now everyone expected it to be Pat Coogan and Billy Schrauth. But just don't count out Spindler, okay? I'm not saying he's going to win the job, but don't count him out. Don't write him off, because he surprised us all last year, and he did it again this spring, because I don't think anyone really expected Spindler to be a very active participant in spring ball. And then there he was out there in the first practice. And, maybe he's still got some growing or some rehabbing to do. Maybe he's not at full 100%, but I think he's already recovered faster than most people expected. And I think he's going to put up one hell of a fight to win that starting guard job. So I think it's going to be really interesting how this shakes out. I feel like the interior of the offensive line, like you've got Ashton Craig, that's set there in the middle, but I feel like this is a legitimate three-man competition. It's not like right tackle where we might just have a winner by default. These three guys both could start. Or all three of these guys could start for both of these positions. You see what I mean here. Words are hard. But I just think that whatever happens in the spring, we always have to remember Spindler is still recovering, and that whatever happens, it could change in the fall, just like it did last year. I'm telling you, I was stunned when I first heard that Coogan was running out there with Rocco Spindler, but it happens. Billy Schrauth was still very young. He's a redshirt freshman, but now that he's going into his third year, this is really the time. when offensive linemen, if they're really that good, they start to take off. So I expect a big jump in Stroud's development. I think there's a really good chance that he ends up starting alongside Pat Coogan. And it's a pretty good situation for Notre Dame if they have a guy like Rocco Spindler who could come in and back up either of those guys at any point. Normally, you don't rotate guys in the offensive line, but look, injuries happen, and it's great to have a guy like Spindler who's experienced and ready to play right there if anything were to happen. Okay, this next one here might surprise you a little bit. I'm really intrigued at tight end number 2 because we all know tight end 1 is Mitchell Evans, right? He was the second best offensive player in some games last season, in some key games, like that Duke game, for example. But as he recovers from the torn ACL that he suffered against Pittsburgh last season, the second tight end spot is up for grabs. And even though Notre Dame probably isn't going to be running 12 personnel this season as much now that Mike Denbrock is the offensive coordinator and the fact that they have more talented receivers in that room, it's still a very important position. You think about the tight end room, man. They have dealt with a lot of injuries. I think there's 5 torn ACLs in that room now because you've got Mitchell Evans has 1, Eli Raridan has 2, Kevin Bauman has a couple. So it's a lot of talented players, but a lot of injuries. So odds are 1 or maybe 2 of these guys are going to get hurt. So that second tight end spot is a lot more important now than we might have expected it to be going into spring ball. So I'm looking at Cooper Flanagan and Eli Raridan. Everyone expects this to be Eli Raridan, and he could have a breakout season this year. I know that I'm really high on him, but I thought it was really interesting. He was not very active in that first spring practice. Does that mean, he has another injury that maybe we don't know that much about? Maybe. No one asked Marcus Freeman about it in his press conference. I'm sure we're going to learn more about it here in the future. Maybe they were just sitting him out because he was having some complications. I don't know. Right, but I think it's something to monitor here, and I think that it could open the door for a guy like Cooper Flanagan, who really impressed a lot of people as a true freshman when I don't think anyone really expected him to be much of a factor at all, but he was actually so good that he was on the field. Hell, he even had a touchdown there. I believe it was against Wake Forest on a pass from Steve Angeli. I think he's already exceeded expectations, so if he were to come out and ball out during spring practice, and if Eli Raridan is dealing with an injury, then maybe he slides in there into that second tight end spot. We know he's a really good blocker. We haven't seen him run a lot of routes yet, but he did have that one catch, and I think he's got it in him. Speaking of tight ends who can catch, Jack Larson, true freshman, he's not in spring ball, but he's going to be a guy to monitor later on. So it's going to be an interesting spot, right? Because we all know who the starter is going to be, but Notre Dame likes to bring in those 2 tight ends, and I feel like Notre Dame kind of needs the next guy in the wings. We all thought it was going to be either Eli Raridan or Holden Stays. Holden Stays decided to transfer to Tennessee. Now, I really don't understand that move. I didn't really understand it at the time. Maybe just wasn't really a fit with that room and the program at large. But I think, that next tight end, because this is probably going to be Mitchell Evans' last year. And I think that whoever that next guy is going to be is probably going to have to start stepping up, at least start showing the signs this spring practice. I'm sure it's probably going to change as time goes on and maybe even into the fall. But I think that's a position that I'm really keeping an eye on. Okay, a couple honorable mentions here. Running back 1. It's really not a competition, right? Dylan McCullough likes to rotate a ton of guys anyway. We know that Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love are going to get the bulk of the carries. I expect Jabron Payne is going to get some carries as well, as much as that might frustrate my friend and former co-host Luke Smith. I think he's just going to be a factor, considering he was taking away carries from Wojciak Estime last season. I feel like he's probably going to be taking some carries from Price and Love this season. Also, I think that Kedron Young is going to get some carries as well. He looks physically ready to go. Hell, he looks like a junior. So these guys are all going to be in the mix, maybe even Aeneas Williams. But who's going to be the alpha in that group? Like, when shit starts to hit the fan, who is Notre Dame going to go to? Is it going to be Love? Is it going to be Price? I think it's going to be Price. I think he's the more, natural all-around running back, whereas like Jeremiah Love is more like the lightning. If it's a lightning thunder type of deal, that'll be interesting. But I do think that Price is going to prove to be the alpha, and I think it's going to start in spring practice. Not mentioned, I'm not including wide receiver, partially because Bo Collins and Jordan Faison, 2 guys who are absolutely going to be competing for the starting jobs, aren't able to participate much in spring practice. Jordan Faison is in the middle of lacrosse season, and he's one of the best players on the team, so he can't really be super involved in Notre Dame's spring practices. And then Bo Collins is going to be around. He's going to be an observer at practices, but he can't really participate because he's still technically a student at Clemson. He's taking online classes while he lives in South Bend, and I just feel like Notre Dame has 6 guys who can realistically start. This is going to be really intriguing in the fall. We're probably going to get a good idea of who the top guys are now. But again, you're adding Collins and Faison in later. So that's going to be really interesting. Plus receiver, we're going to rotate. We're going to see guys rotate all the time. So I'm not really including that. I'm also not including center as well. I mentioned it earlier. It's Ashton Craig. That was settled when the Notre Dame coaching staff told Zeke Correll, the starter for the past 2 seasons, hey, it's probably time to enter your name in the transfer portal. Okay, coming up in segment 3, year 1 of the Micah Shrewsbury era is officially over for the Notre Dame men's basketball program. What went wrong in the loss to Wake Forest and what lies ahead next? Today's episode is brought to you by Amazon Fire TV. Fire TV is your destination for sports. From live games to highlights to in-depth analysis, Fire TV also offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing television. And it provides access to millions of movies and television episodes as well as free and live TV. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball or the college basketball tournament, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes all of us at Locked On and most of the big professional leagues and college conferences as well. Fire TV channels lets you dive into all the game analysis, highlights, and more to stay up to date on all the latest in the world of sports, not to mention great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, and cooking videos as well. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me on this. Check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. To learn more, visit amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. This episode is also brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebay.com/motors. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Unfortunately, the 23-24 Notre Dame men's basketball season came to an end on Wednesday afternoon when the Irish fell to the 5th-seeded Wake Forest Demon Deacons by a score of 72-59 on Wednesday afternoon. And even though the loss is disappointing, I feel like no one really expected Notre Dame to make a deep run in the ACC tournament. I thought the best-case scenario for this group would be to get out of the second round. I definitely thought they were capable of winning the first round. They did. They beat Georgia Tech for the 3rd time this season. Now, granted, that was really close there at the end. I was definitely a little nervous about that, but they were able to get that win. And then, I thought they had a chance against Wake Forest. They had just beaten them at home a couple weeks ago. But the difference here is that Wake Forest is a bubble team in the NCAA tournament. They absolutely could not afford to lose this game, and they played like it. They came out hot out of the gates. They really never gave Notre Dame a chance. Wake Forest led this one wire to wire, and even though there were moments during the game when it felt like Notre Dame was clawing their way back in it, maybe they got a couple buckets, and you're like, okay, they cut the lead to 6. Maybe they can go on a run here and take the lead. It just wasn't happening for the Irish in this one. They didn't shoot the ball well. They shot 28% from the field, 26% from 3, and they lost the turnover battle. You're just not going to win many games like that, especially when you're not as talented as the opponent, as was the case here for Notre Dame. So it was definitely unfortunate. I had high hopes. I thought what Notre Dame was able to accomplish at the end of this season, specifically when they won 5 games in 6 games, that was just really, really impressive, especially considering the fact that they had just lost 7 in a row not too long ago. They could have folded, but they didn't. Micah Shrewsbury got his guys ready to play, and you could tell that the players were really upset after this loss. Not only were they mad about the loss, but they were upset that this season came to an end. And even though this is a really young team, they've got a lot more college basketball to play. It's really disappointing, and you could tell how much these guys cared, and that was something that really stuck out to me because last year when the season ended in the ACC tournament, I was kind of like, thank God this is over, right? Because this was just really, it was just dragging to the end. And even though it was cool when Mike Bray had his last home game and he was going to the backer and he was doing shots with students, like that part was all great, but the actual basketball was not fun. Like this Notre Dame men's basketball team has been highly entertaining. Sure, they finished the season 13-20, but they were really fun to watch, at least at the end. The Citadel game, not the most fun game ever, to say the least. But in a way, I'm actually kind of happy that this season is over because we always knew that the first year of the Micah Shrewsbury era was going to be tough, right? Notre Dame did not have many guys in this roster that had much experience at all at the college basketball level. We knew they were going to be really young, and we knew that there were going to be a lot of growing pains to figure out. And there were, right? This season was a struggle, particularly at the beginning of the year. But now it's over, right? Now that season is gone. So we've got, hopefully, the worst part out of the way, and now we can start looking ahead to the future because I think this is a very important offseason for Micah Shrewsbury. Last year, he couldn't really be active in the transfer portal because how are you going to pitch a good player, especially one who's at like the end of their college basketball career, to come join Notre Dame when they were in a complete rebuild? They had to start from scratch, essentially. So how do you convince a good player to finish out their college career at a program who no one really expects to even finish 500? Now that you have 13 wins under your belt, there's real proof that you've got some young guys who are really talented, like Marcus Burton, who's the ACC Rookie of the Year. You've got Braden Shrewsbury, who really started to catch fire there at the end. Like, there is a foundation in place now, and you've got Kerry Booth and Keba Jai. Like, there's young guys with really bright futures at Notre Dame, and I think that's going to start to take shape next season. So now Notre Dame has to go out. They absolutely need to get a veteran big like Paul Atkinson a few years ago. That was just something they desperately missed this season. So if they go out, get a player like that, add a couple more veteran pieces, some talented playmakers, this Notre Dame team could be fighting for a spot in the NCAA tournament as early as this time next year. I know it's probably a little bit early from what I first anticipated when Micah Shrewsbury took the job. I thought it'd be 3 seasons, but I feel like Notre Dame showed me enough this season that they have a real shot at being a bubble team next year, so long as all these guys stay, and I think they will by the sound of it. These guys really want to be a part of this program. They want to play for Micah Shrewsbury, and they want to be here for the long haul. Now, I'm not saying that, one guy's probably going to leave, maybe even 2. It is modern college basketball. You never really know, but I feel confident that Notre Dame is going to be able to retain the vast majority of their roster, and then they're going to be able to build on that in recruiting. Sir Muhammad is coming in. I think he's going to be really impactful as a true freshman. So the future is bright for the Notre Dame men's basketball program. Like I said, I'm kind of happy that the season is over, even though I'm not happy they lost to Wake Forest. It's like, all right, we got that out of the way. Now it's time to get back to where this program needs to be, in the place that they haven't been in a really long time. Like, I'm tired of watching the NCAA tournament and Notre Dame not being a part. It is just so much more fun. Even if they, end up getting dropped in the first weekend, at least they're in it. Hopefully they can win a first-round game, and I miss those days, man. And I feel like we're close. We're just about a year away, maybe 2, but at least we can start thinking about that next season, when this season it never really was on the table. All right, that's going to do it for me today. Thanks again for making Locked On Irish first listen of the day. Remember, subscribe on YouTube or wherever you're listening to the podcast, and give us a follow on social media. The X account is at Locked On Irish. The Instagram is at Locked On Irish Pod, and my personal X account is at Tyler WOJCIAK. I'll see you guys tomorrow.